Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychologist who comprises like the backbone of modern Western psychology, had a quote. And what he said was, "Beware of unearned wisdom." And when I learned about this, it was during a time of my life where I was engaging in fields of spirituality and philosophy and self-inquiry that at the time I feel like I wasn't I hadn't braced myself for the world that I was getting into. I didn't brace myself for what I was getting myself involved with. And when I learned about this statement that Carl Jung made, "Beware of unearned wisdom," I realized that it applied to me directly. Now, what this statement means, "beware of unearned wisdom," is that I feel like it's more prominent now than it's ever been, where one click away, one Google search away is the most profound teachings and philosophies and studies and practices that are available that humans have ever come up with. You can learn about the craziest stuff and the most far out esoteric stuff in just one little Google search. And see, when you're somebody who find yourself fascinated in the field of spirituality, for example, you'll find yourself studying and dipping your fingers and dipping your toes into all these different areas of Hinduism and Buddhism and South American shamanism and astrology and all this stuff, self-inquiry and non-duality and all these very far out things. And it's so readily available to us with this technology that we can just dive right into it. But I want to warn against getting overly involved in something that you aren't quite yet ready to fully embody. Now, I am personally guilty of this, where at 16 years old, I'm 24 now, and at 16 years old, I found myself a part of something that I had, first of all, no control over, but something that so drastically changed my life in such a short period of time that within 2 years, who I had become was so unrecognizable to who I once was in that past 2 years, and I found myself ungrounded. I found myself disoriented. It's like psychologically, spiritually disoriented. At such a young age, I was getting involved with psychedelics. I was getting involved with Eastern mysticism, spirituality, yoga, Hinduism, God, non-duality, self-inquiry. I was learning about all this crazy stuff. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where when you discover something that really piques your interest, you essentially throw yourself into it. And what this results in is an outpouring of this immediate information that you're learning, where when you learn about something, the second you learn about it, you start talking about it, expressing it, pouring it out, because it's so exciting to be involved in this new field of study that's caught your interest so intensely. But as you continue to learn about this particular field of interest that you're involved in, the rate at which you talk about it and express it begins to decline, because as you continue to learn about this thing, you start to realize that you don't know nowhere near as much about it as you thought you did in the beginning. And I am very guilty of this. And what I want this video to be about is essentially to emphasize that I feel like a lot of us aren't ready for deep spiritual teachings. Spirituality is not on the outside. Spirituality is not something that you wear like a coat. It's not a personality type. Spirituality is something that happens to the one who's looking, the very essence and source and origin of your being itself. And when we're raised in this world where we think, I'm a human and this is my life and I want to do this and this is my hobbies and my interests and my job and my relationship and my dreams and my frustrations, and we create this like structure that we live in of ego. And when you get into something like spirituality, things can start to get really rocky and really bumpy very quick. And, when you discover something like spirituality, it's very exciting. This is how it was for me when I initially got into spirituality. It was, oh my God, crystals and mantra and yoga and meditation and philosophy and psychology and psychedelics and learning about God and learning about no self, anatta, and learning about this profound dimension of existence that I didn't know about because the culture that I live in doesn't support it. And I found myself just hurling myself into this world of spirituality. And through years of psychedelic experiences and deep meditation and self-inquiry of looking into the question of who am I? What is life? What is death? What is love? What is pain? What is this existence that I find myself a part of? And going into these altered states through psychedelics and yoga and meditation and all this kind of stuff, I found myself a part of something that I didn't really have a navigational orientation to be able to navigate. I didn't have a compass. I didn't know what I was working with. And like I said, I feel like this is something that is very prominent now, much more so now than it has ever been, because we can, spirituality is like this fad, this faddish thing that people are getting involved with more and more and more. It's becoming a very common thing to be spiritual. But like I said, spirituality is not out here. Spirituality originates from the one who is experiencing life. Spirituality isn't how many crystals you have. It isn't how many ayahuasca experiences you've had. It isn't wearing specific clothes or wearing beads or how many mantras you can recite or how many different yoga asanas you can perform or how long you meditate and if you meditate every day. That is not spirituality. That is spiritual materialism. That is an externalization of something that is much more an intimate, personal journey. And what results in this ability to seemingly hurl ourselves into a world of philosophy and self-inquiry and psychology and transformation of our consciousness is we can become very ungrounded. And I've seen this a lot in people in my immediate life. Not only does it result in the almighty spiritual ego, where you think that because you're involved in spirituality and you've discovered that you're not who you think you are and that life is actually this spiritual dimension of karmic work that we're doing and, all this stuff, you can start to think that you're like better than people. You know what I'm saying? You've probably come across this. It's somebody who thinks that because they're aware of a spiritual reality, that they're better than the normies who are still living in their life of worldly association, where they have their hobbies and their jobs and their relationships and their worldly problems, and you think that because you're aware of this spiritual transcendent reality that not only are you better than them, but you know the way out for them. And what this results in is being just arrogant, being a douchebag, to put it frankly, And this is something I'm very guilty of, And to talk from my personal experience of how this really happened for me, when I got involved with spirituality and I got involved with psychedelics and I started having these mind-melting, mind-shattering experiences of transcendence of self and the recognition of God, the recognition of the timeless, infinite nature of reality, the recognition of true oneness, of not just saying, oh my God, it's all one, but realizing like, shit, dude, like this is all just one melted experience, and the only thing that creates distinction and difference is my idea of what makes things different. When I started experiencing all this stuff, the one who was experiencing it wasn't quite ready to really embody and get down with what it was that I was experiencing. And what this resulted in is losing my ground. I became psychologically disoriented. And the way that this manifested itself for me was thinking that I was literally losing my mind. I was going crazy because I would experience this ecstatic, transcendent state of realizing that God is everything and therefore I am God and there is no Devon and there is no death and I was never born and all this crazy stuff that when you look at it and when you read about it and you're coming from like a worldly place, it sounds like exciting. But in experiencing it, it's a whole different reality. It's a whole different experience when you actually experience the depth of it. When you actually experience the reality of the fact that you're not who you think you are, that there is no death, there is no separation, that God is real and God is everything. When you start experiencing this shit, be ready. Be ready. This is what Carl Jung is talking about, of beware of unearned wisdom. Because the normal person who's lived a worldly life for 30 years, they can go to India and perform yoga and jnana yoga and study God and realize that they are God, and they can go down to South America and take ayahuasca with the shamans, and they can meditate and inquire into the self and do all these far out esoteric things that are so exciting. They seem like, and I mean, to be fair, it is a liberation from a worldly life. But let me tell you, if you're not ready to experience these things, if you're not respecting these things you're getting into, you're not going to know what to do with that energy. And this is what happened to me, where I was a 16-year-old kid who, you know, I had my personal reasons why I was attracted to magic and spirituality and Buddhism and meditation and psychedelics and all this stuff. But nevertheless, even though I was magnetized towards that way of being, I wasn't ready to embody the energy that was soon to be born out of getting involved in that spiritual lifestyle. It was essentially like, when I, you know, with like psychedelics in particular, something that by taking this chemical, it can completely override where you are at in a particular moment. Where you think you're Joe Schmo and you're just this normal being and you're depressed and life is the way it is and life sucks and I'm a Republican with my family and my job that matters so much. And then you take something like LSD and you realize that there is no Joe Schmo. There is no such thing as Republican. There is no you. There is, you know, you get like opened up into this dimension of God consciousness where time completely dissolves and the veil of separation drops and you realize God and all this shit. Do you think Joe Schmo has the psychological criteria to be able to handle such an experience? You know? I didn't at the time when I was getting into this stuff, and what that resulted in was becoming imbalanced. I lost my balance. I lost my ground. And what resulted from that is feeling increasingly uneasy, like I was losing my mind. Like I had a lot of anxiety. I would have random panic attacks. I would have these moments of dissociation and depersonalization where I didn't feel like me. I felt like I was experiencing this dream, and it created this intense alienation from not only life and others, but my very self. I was experiencing these downloads, as they call it, that I didn't know what to do with. It was like running 30 amps through a system that can only handle 10 amps. At the time of being a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, I could only handle 10 amps of energy. 10 amps of energy of being a high schooler and my relationships and my job, and I'm learning about what I want to do with my life and all these worldly affairs and stuff. But then I take acid and I experience that Devon is an illusion and time is an illusion and I was never born nor will I die. And while I'm simultaneously experiencing bliss, I'm also experiencing terror because this transcendent experience is completely vaporizing my model, my structural context of who I was. And this resulted in panic, this resulted in anxiety, this resulted in confusion, of feeling no direction, of losing my ground. You know what I'm saying? And it was very uneasy for me. And I lost my ground and I started to feel, oh my God, I'm going insane. I'm going to develop psychosis. I'm going to develop schizophrenia. You know what I'm saying? I got scared of spirituality because on the outside, when you're used to a worldly life and you look at spirituality, it's all sparkly and amazing and fun and beautiful and light and so much different than the drag of day-to-day life that we live in generally in this culture. But guys, when you start to get into this stuff, it starts to really open up. It starts to really get deep and get real. Terence McKenna, who is a huge, renowned psychedelic speaker, talks about people mistake these psychedelic experiences that they hear of realizing that they're God and contacting aliens and interdimensional beings and realizing that there is no separation and all this fantastic stuff. They think of it as like a metaphor. But then you take the psychedelic and it actually happens. It actually manifests itself. And you're thinking, oh my God, I thought it was just like an idea. I thought it was just a concept. I didn't know it was actually gonna happen. The idea of I don't exist is like really fancy and groovy and cool and sounds spiritual. But when you realize you don't exist on an experiential level, it's a lot different. There is a drastic difference between knowledge and experience. This is the Dunning-Kruger thing I'm talking about, where when you get into something, spirituality for example, it's so exciting and it's so new and it's such a different take on reality, and there's so much uplifting and there's so much liberation of pain and all this kind of stuff. But as you continue to get into it, you start to realize how deep of a reality it really is. And you start to talk about it less. You start to not maybe associate yourself with it as much because you realize, damn, like I don't know really what I'm getting myself into. So what I want to say to you in this video is to be careful and to tread lightly when it comes to something like spirituality. You know, because not only will you develop this lack of ground, but you'll develop this spiritual ego thing where you spiritually bypass others and yourself. You know what I mean? Like when I look back at me in the peak of my spiritual ego, spiritual bypass stage, you know, somebody would tell me they're depressed and I'd say depression is just an emotion, man. If you just let it go, you'll be free. They'll tell me I'm sad. They'd say, I'm really sad right now. And I'd say, there is no you, so there's no you for there to be sad. You see what I'm saying? They say, or if I felt anger, I would like disable that feeling of anger or that feeling of sadness by thinking, well, that's just an emotion and I'll just let it go, man. You know? So I was like bypassing my own psychology, and what this resulted in was losing my ground, was not living from a place of authenticity, not living from a place of truth. And also what it did was invalidate everybody around me, where somebody was upset about something and I'd blame it on their ego. Oh, that's just ego, man. You know? Or when I experienced pain, heartbreak, anger, fear, sadness, whatever it was, I'd invalidate myself. Oh, that's just ego stuff. I'd blame myself and feel guilty. Well, if I were more spiritual, I wouldn't feel angry. I wouldn't feel sad. You know what I'm saying? So not only does this spiritual ego begin to develop, where you think, that's like the beginning of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you're so involved and enthralled with this world of spirituality that you think you're like better than everybody. You think that there's a spiritual remedy for every single thing that comes at you. And when somebody tells you, and when somebody like disagrees with you, you see, well, they're just resonating on a different plane of belief, and that doesn't infringe on my system, even though they're like completely dismantling and disproving what you're talking about and where you're coming from. You don't see it because you're spiritually bypassing it, where you're hiding behind spiritual ideas and spiritual ideologies. So, you know, and like a really intense area that this manifested itself for me as a young adolescent person getting involved, like hurling myself into spirituality, was I developed self-hatred. Which sounds strange because you'd think getting into spirituality means you learn to love yourself and love everything and love everybody and all this stuff. But you know the thing called ego? And you know how in the spiritual community, the ego is the thing that must be slain and it's the main impediment to your spiritual progression and all this stuff. When I learned about that, I started to develop hatred for ego. And ego is the very orientation device of identity, where I'm Devon and this is life and I'm making a video and this is what I want and this is what makes me upset and this is what's happened to me. It's the ego, it's the self-orientation of self and other and life. And what I developed from getting into this spiritual stuff when I wasn't yet at a deep enough understanding of what it really meant, I developed self-hatred. Where I'd want something, like I'd want to buy something, or I'd want to be in a relationship, or I'd walk by the mirror and think that I look good or something, and I would invalidate that. I would say, nope, that's an egoic thing. It's egoic to desire to be in a relationship. It's arrogant to think that I look good. You know, I'd want to post a selfie of myself on Instagram or something, and I'd think, nope, that's arrogant. That's ego. If I were spiritual, a spiritual person wouldn't want to be in a relationship. A spiritual person wouldn't think that they look good. I had this complete misunderstanding. You know what I'm saying? And like, look back at like the 60s, like the psychedelic hippie revolution, where psychedelics were introduced to the world and people were awakening, people were blossoming. So much beauty happened in that time of realizing the impediment of thinking that I am this self and I am my thoughts and I'm locked in this body and this world sucks, and becoming liberated from that. But you know what else happened in the 60s revolution? Is people were throwing themselves out of windows and people were starting cults and people were running around saying, I am God and none of you are, and you aren't awakened, all of you sheep, and people were losing their mind. People were being sent to insane asylums because they couldn't handle the energy of what they were getting themselves involved with. It's too much energy. It's the same idea of how like somebody that's poor or like average financial income, and then they win $1 billion in lottery, and within 2 years they're bankrupt and addicted to drugs, or they take their own life or something like that. It's because the being that got involved with that stuff wasn't ready or able to handle the energy of all of that high vibration stuff. In that sense, talking about the high vibration of having billions of dollars. They can't handle it. And what I'm talking about is the high vibration energy that comes about when we get involved with something like spirituality. You know, we can't handle it. So I really want to stress and emphasize the importance of taking it slow. Spirituality isn't about how many different sutras from the Bhagavad Gita you can recite, or how long you meditate every day, or how many times you've taken ayahuasca, or who's taken the most mushrooms. It's not this pissing contest of esoteric stuff. It's very intimate. It's very personal. It's between you and God. You know what I'm saying? It's between you and reality itself. It's how you carry yourself. It's what you see of a situation in a given context. It's how you treat your fellow brothers and sisters. It's not this externalized thing that you wear like every other personality cult that you've gotten involved with. Spirituality is a way of being. It's not knowledge. Knowledge is what you begin to see and dismantle as you continue to get more and more involved with real spiritual practices. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu says the Tao is understanding the way, you know, this is paraphrased, but understanding the way of the Tao is not a series of acquiring and learning, but it's a series of letting go and unlearning. Spirituality isn't something you gain. Spirituality is something you return to by relaxing, by settling down a little bit. And it's honestly like the journey of spiritual progression. It goes in this huge circle of opening up and realizing that you aren't who you thought you were, and life isn't what it seems, and God is real, and magic is real, and this universe is a mystery and a dream. And you realize all this profound, incredible stuff. But then what you do when you you really understand it, you know, the Dunning-Kruger effect, how you get really excited and then it starts to settle down. When you really understand this shit, you come back into the body. You come back into the mundane. You settle down. And it's a matter of how you talk to people, how you carry yourself, how you live your day-to-day life. It comes back into simplicity. It's not about the profound vision you had while you were meditating, or how long you were lost in samadhi, or what you saw on your ayahuasca experience. These spiritual experiences are profound catalysts for transformation in our life, but they, at the end of the day, are experiences of which we need to assimilate and integrate. And I want to say it again, when you get involved in this stuff and you're not ready for it, it could blow your socks off, man. You could lose your ground. What could have been beneficial and transformative were you to be in a grounded, respectful state, turns out to be something that is to your detriment. And to other people's detriment, where you invalidate yourself, or you think you're God and therefore treat people like shit, or you lose your mind and you become so disillusioned and disoriented with what reality is that you can't even hold a job. You don't even, you know what I'm saying? All these people that just like lose it. I literally know people in my personal life and like on social media that, like, you know, one person, for example, thinks the government's out to get them and they are God, and the government is trying to sap this spiritual energy out of them and turn it into nuclear power. I mean, maybe he's right. Who am I to judge, you know what I'm saying? But the idea is that we can get involved in some shit that we're not ready to really embody. You know, we can lose our ground. Spirituality isn't this like ecstatic bliss thing. It's about who you think you are, what you think reality is, how you carry yourself, you know? So when Carl Jung says beware of unearned wisdom, what he's saying is you can learn about the crazy shit. You can go down to South America and take ayahuasca with the shamans. You can go to India and study yoga and go into states of samadhi and experience visions and ecstasy and oneness with God, unity with God. But who is it that's experiencing that? That's the main question. Who is it that's experiencing these spiritual transformations? That should be your main focus, is from what point, from what set, from what place are you engaging in these spiritual transformations? You know, I don't know who it was that said it, but I heard that, like, to take yoga, for example, it was described that learning yoga, studying yoga, which once again is, if you find a real yoga practitioner, not the just stretching yoga, but real yoga that implements the mind and the spirit and consciousness and soul and chakras and kundalini, all these fancy, incredible things. When you find a real practitioner of yoga, they understand that getting involved with yoga isn't just child's play. It isn't just spiritual, esoteric stuff, man. You know? Getting involved with something like yoga or psychedelics, I've heard it described, it's like climbing up a tree. You take psychedelics, you study yoga, you inquire into the self, you take ayahuasca, you meditate. It's like climbing up this tree. But the question is, do you know how to climb back down? Do you know how to come back down to ground? You can climb in this ecstatic state of climbing to the top of the tree of spiritual enlightenment, of samadhi, of ecstasy and unity with God and all this stuff. But do you know how to get back down? Do you know how to come back down into a place of centered, even groundedness? That's what's important, you know? And we, in our zeal to spiritually progress, can get a little bit out ahead of ourselves. Where, you know, like in my instance, within like 2 years of being involved with psychedelics and Eastern mysticism and all this stuff, which I must say is where this channel was born from, within like 2 years, I was a completely different person. And looking in retrospect, it's been a completely beneficial transformation, but at the time being, I might not have said the same thing. I was very uneasy. I was very ungrounded. I didn't really know what reality was and who I was and what all this was about, and I was very arrogant. I thought that I had like this chip on my shoulder, like I was better than everybody because I'd realized that I am God and they haven't yet realized it, and all this far out stuff. You know what I'm saying? So be careful. Tread lightly. This stuff isn't like just another hobby. It's not like getting into skiing or getting into surfing or going to the gym and working out. It's stuff that completely rearranges your relationship with life itself, existence itself. You look at this moment right now. This moment is a complete mystery. It's a complete open canvas of perception and how you structure and identify and orient yourself in it. So be careful when you get into spirituality, when you get into yoga, when you get into Hinduism, when you get into self-inquiry, when you get into philosophy, when you get into psychedelics and meditation and all these things, because your life can transform in a matter of months. And you might not have anticipated the depth and the power to which these things were actually going to affect you. You know? And to bring back up the technology thing, I very much so feel like we're not ready for this shit. We're not ready for this spiritual stuff that we're just consuming like it's a book or like it's another hobby or like it's another coat to wear on our ego. You know, the fact that I can go online and learn about the teachings of Ramana Maharshi or the teachings of Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras or learning about all this really far out stuff. You know, I can't even begin to name off all the examples, but like non-duality, for example, that there is no... it's all one, and there is no self, and there is no other, and there was no one that was born or dies, and all this stuff. Like there's this whole like wave of like radical non-duality extremists that completely have lost their ground. I know some of them that have literally been sent to like mental institutes because they lost their ground. They got scared. They didn't know what the hell they were involving themselves with. They didn't consider the actual depth and power of what they were getting themselves involved in. Like I said, it's like running 30 amps through something that can only handle 10 amps. So you can get into this stuff, you can learn about this stuff, but make sure that along the way, you're taking the initiative to upgrade your hardware. And what that might mean is not reading more books, not taking more acid and DMT and ayahuasca, not meditating for 3 hours every day. You know what I'm saying? Not overindulging in these spiritual, esoteric things, but taking the time to live your life as it is and to integrate what it is that you're associating yourself with. Because when you actually take the time to come into a place of balance and equilibrium with these things, it will be much, much more beneficial and transformative, and you will be of much more service to life, to yourself and to others. But when you overindulge and you get a little overexcited and you start over-consuming all this stuff, you may end up losing your ground, and you may end up hurting yourself, and as a result, hurting other people. So this stuff needs to be taken very seriously, very gently, and with reverence, because this stuff is no joke. This stuff is no joke. These spiritual realizations can completely shatter your perception of reality. It's no joke. I literally can't stress that enough. And you won't know what I'm talking about until it's happened to you. And I'm not saying it's bad that these things will or could happen to you, but what I'm really saying is be ready, be willing to surrender, and be willing to take the time to realistically integrate it. Spirituality isn't about chasing this dragon of ecstasy. You know, like I said, it's about who you are, how you carry yourself. So the essence of what I'm saying here is that, like Carl Jung said, beware of unearned wisdom. You can go and do it all and learn it all and experience it all, but to what benefit is it going to have for you if you lose your ground and hurt yourself and others in the process of that? What benefit is it going to be if you come back from a experience of transcendence and liberation and now you think you're God and nobody else is as good as you? What good does that do? You know what I'm saying? So take it easy. You know? This life is just but one experience. So you have all of this life and all of what's to come to grow. You know what I'm saying? To experience this life. Spirituality isn't this external thing. It's who you are. You know? And a lot of us, myself included, initially, got into spirituality as if it was this thing that was like, oh my God, how much more can I acquire, man? Whoop, I'm slipping. How much more can I acquire? You know what I mean? How long can I meditate? How many mantras can I memorize? How many spiritual holy books can I read? You know what I'm saying? Like, it creates this imbalance. It very much so can create this imbalance. And I feel like you guys get the idea that this stuff is no joke and should be taken with a grain of salt. Taken gently, tread lightly, go at it from a place of reverence, and to put it simply, don't be stupid. Don't be stupid. You know, you go out to the bar with your friends and you start drinking and you realize like you shouldn't have another drink, but you say, fuck it, you know, I'm gonna keep drinking, and you keep drinking. You know you shouldn't, but you keep doing it out of your own ignorance. Don't do that when it comes to spirituality, because it'll come back and bite you. It'll come back and bite you. You know, you're going to lose your balance. You're going to lose your ground. So take it easy. You're going to spiritually develop as quick or as slow as you are meant to spiritually develop. So don't think that you can play God and outrun your karma and where you are. Because like I said, it's going to have this rebound effect where you get put back down in your place, and where you get put back down into might not be as pretty and beautiful and flashy as what you initially got involved with. So take it easy. Spirituality is no joke. Don't rush. Slow down. Take it easy. You're not doing anything wrong by integrating and by taking time to settle back into where you are. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. I really hope it was insightful. And if it was, consider leaving a thumbs up so that this video can get recommended to more people like you.